Welcome, I'm Matt Hoverman with Go Solo, and I'm here with the fabulous solo show artiste, Aizzah Fatima. And Aizzah and I worked together. She developed her show in the Go Solo workshop in 2009
Mhm.
when she was 12. Obviously, look at her. She looks like she's about 28 years old right now. And um, and she's had wonderful success. Her show was called Dirty Paki Lingerie, and the play has had sold out performances and received rave reviews in the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, the Flea Theater, 59 East 59th, Abingdon Theater in New York, Toronto at the Harbourfront Center. There was a tour in Pakistan sponsored by the US Department of State. Oh my goodness. Three tours in the United Kingdom, including a 15-city tour in 2016, in addition to a US college tour. Uh, Dirty Paki Lingerie is the first play to be invited to represent the United States at the International Theater Festival of Turkmenistan. The Wall Street Journal hailed the play and said that it breaks down stereotypes of Muslim women in America, and critics have called it a must-see production. The play has been nominated for a Broadway World Award and a Manchester Theatre Award in the United Kingdom. Oh my goodness, Aizzah Fatima,
That's so
welcome.
amazing. Thank you.
So Aizzah, we're having this interview for my upcoming panel, which is called "I Wrote a Solo Show, Now What?" And a lot of my students and other solo show creators, or even people just dreaming about the solo show, really wonder, well, I put all this effort into writing it. How do I get it out there? And you've just had tremendous success getting your show out there. And so I'm just going to walk you through the journey of your solo show and ask you questions that will help people who are further back along the path and can be inspired and given some helpful tips.
Sounds great. And I think I would say I was exactly where some of these people are. I feel like I took your class and I was like, I don't know what to do.
I remember I always do interviews when people start my class, and we spoke, and you now, had you ever written before you wrote your solo show?
Nothing. I was super new to acting. I wasn't even acting. I'd done the 2-year conservatory at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, which was an
Right.
evening program at the time. I had a full-time job working in tech. I
Yeah.
hadn't even acted in anything. And I was
Yeah.
like, I'm gonna do a solo show all by myself for the first thing I ever do. Yeah.
That's right. And you had an even bigger vision than that. I mean, I remember our conversation, and you had a larger goal for the impact you wanted your show. Tell us a little bit about the show and what you wanted to do with it.
Look, to be honest, I think it started off with me being just like, I had gone to the ADA and then I was like, oh, for fun, I'll just audition. And as I was auditioning, I was just realizing there aren't any part out there for me. This was like 2009, 2010. And I was like, just for fun, I'll audition, but I still have my tech job working at Google by the day, you know?
Why aren't there parts for you? Because you are.
Because I am this. And the parts were like tall, leggy blonde. Literally, I remember reading this and I'm like, I am not that. Like in
Yeah.
Backstage, back in the day. And it was just like I don't fit this mold that people are looking for. And it's so interesting. Like once in a while, a part would come along and they would see like for diverse whatever, and they would see every me and the fire eater and the whoever else, it's crazy. I was like, what is this? So yeah, it just didn't exist. This kind of, and I didn't have raps and I didn't know how to have a career. As an actor at that time, my only goal was like to be a theater actor. And it just didn't, there was no pathway,
I
for
also remember around that time, there was a lot of, anyone who was vaguely East Asian, Arab American was auditioning for the part of the terrorist's wife, right?
yes, that's a real thing. I mean, that's very much a real thing. Those were some of the parts that were out there. Once a year, you would get one of those things that would come out, and then of course they would see you for that. But yeah, that was about it. Yeah.
And so your goal was to create a pathway for yourself, but I also feel like it was to increase representation of Arab American
I
women and
think it,
show
yeah.
sides of them that hadn't been
Honestly,
seen before.
yeah, I think when I wrote it, I didn't really realize, right? I just wrote it and I was like, I just want to create something that I can act in. And then when I just first did it, it was at the Midtown Festival. I remember that experience changed me because of the audience. like people who came who were like, we've never seen ourselves being on stage ever before, you know, like Muslim women, even like Japanese couples, whoever, like people who really like, you know, the woman from the Bronx who was like, that character was like my auntie who talks exactly the same way, you know, the old lady character in the play. So yeah, and then I realized like, oh, this is actually for people who don't usually see their experiences being reflected. So then working on this play actually made my goals kind of bigger. I was just like, oh, let's create more work for other people. Like, let's give a voice to these people who don't usually have it. It changed. Honestly, the play changed me and changed my goals as a creator, yeah, as an artist.
Well, describe the play to us. Like, how would you synopsize the play?
Yeah, so Dirty Paki Lingerie is I say six Pakistani American Muslim women share their dirty lingerie. So it's like very deep, intimate, funny stories from like these characters that range from a 6-year-old little girl to a 65-year-old lady, and then everything in between. Yeah, that's the place to series of monologues.
So you finished the show in my class, and then you sat there and looked at it and said, I don't know what to do with this. And at that time in New York, there were a number of festivals. There was the New York Fringe Festival, and there was the Midtown International Theater Festival. Both unfortunately are no longer in existence. But so you got into the Midtown how?
I got into the Midtown because somebody who had taken a class with you was dropping out last minute. They had already paid a deposit, and then they sent out an email to a group and they're like, "Hey, can anybody take my spot?" And I was like, "Sure." And then she goes, "Okay, you have to send them your play. They have to approve it, and then you have to like pay them the deposit, and I'll get my deposit back." That was the deal, and it was like $600 or something. And then I was like, "Sure." So I sent in the play. They accepted it, and then yeah, and then that's how I got in.
So your goal for doing the first production was really just to do it, just to see it, just to like.
Yeah, I had never done it. And also, it just like the play was interesting. I ended up working with this director at the time. We kind of like reworked some of the things to
Mhm.
make the play more cohesive, you know,
Yeah.
because it was just
Mhm.
something I had written and had never really, I'd performed, but like 5 minutes at like open mics or 10
Right.
minutes somewhere. But that would, I'd never done the whole thing. Yeah. So it was just the goal was just to get it out there.
Now you say that, but I also remember from that time that you had larger goals, and I think you've always had larger goals and a bigger vision for what could happen with your work because I remember the story of the publicist.
Yeah, yep, you do. That's a good point. So I remember I went to all these publicists and then they were like, "Well, we can't guarantee you like whatever, any big press. We can't." I was like, "Can you get me in the New York Times? Can you get me like, you know, any big press?" And they were like, "No, we can't. No one will guarantee that." And then I just thought, "Well, what's the point of me paying these people all this money?" So you taught I didn't know how to write I mean, I didn't know how to do a I didn't know what a press release was. So I remember you did a class with Robin, right?
Robin
Yeah.
Gelfenbein, right?
Yes, who is also a solo performer and does like, you know, storytelling and all this other stuff. And so Robin did, and you guys together did this class on how to write a press release, how to approach press. And I had no idea. I remember I sat there, I took my notes, and then I went and I was like, okay, I'm going to write a press release. I wrote it and I just did my own press and just, man, luck, a lot of luck and right things at the right time. So the story ended up getting picked up by a feature in the Sunday Wall Street Journal. They ran the feature, and that's where that quote you just read comes from, right? Breaks down stereotypes of Muslim women. And then that story was picked up by NPR that following Monday. All things considered, when that happened, the shows sold out. Like the 5 shows we had, that by that like Wednesday or whatever, it was a sold out run. So yeah, that was amazing. And then I was
Yeah,
like,
how did that feel? That must have been. Now you had never really done the show before, and so like, did that put the pressure on? Were you feeling more anxious then or excited
so
or
much crazy pressure. I remember my first, like, it was so crazy last minute, everything. Like, my first performance, I remember literally I'd be like, okay, I'm gonna turn around, I'm gonna turn into a new character. And I'd turn around, I'd be like, who am I now? Like, literally, it was probably a complete shit show. But
yeah.
the audiences were very generous. And I think by the time that run ended, the show was in a better place. But honestly, it wasn't until the following year, took it to Edinburgh. And
Okay, so how did you make that decision? So you
yeah.
finished the show, you got all this great press, Now, I think that they give out awards in that festival. Were you nominated or did you win an
I
award?
was nominated, but I didn't win any awards in that
Okay.
festival. No,
Yeah, I think
nothing.
awards can be helpful, but I just want people to
Yeah.
know, not necessary, not
You know,
necessary. Yeah,
I will say, right? So back then, I remember I had submitted the play to the New York Fringe because I thought that was going to make or break my career. And I
yeah.
remember when I got rejected. I got rejected from the New York Fringe and I didn't even submit to the Midtown. I just got rejected and I was like, wow, my life is over. Like I must really suck. None of
Mm,
that is true, right? None of that is true.
mhm,
So when I kind of accidentally ended up in the Midtown Festival,
mhm.
that same year, I was just like, okay, let's just make the best because right, the Midtown was the lesser of the two. The Fringe was the better one, which I did not get in. And yeah, so it's just I think it's about just like pushing yourself forward,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Because the
and
one
don't
thing
underestimate that because you say, "Oh, I was lucky I got in here," blah blah blah. You are
I
a
was,
force of nature, Isa. And although and I remember when we first met, when I first interviewed you, you had a vision of changing the conversation in the world about Pakistani American women, about East Asian women and Arab American Muslim women.
yeah, it just
And
yeah.
you've always had that vision. You've always had this larger vision of what, yes, you wanted to further your career, but you always had this vision of, you know,
Mm,
when the publicist said to you, we can't get in the Wall Street Journal, we can't get in the New York Times,
yeah.
your response was just like that. I don't believe that. I'm going to get this, and you did.
Well, and then we did actually even we didn't get a review, but we got a mention in the New York Times as well.
Yeah.
From that Midtown run, there was a mention of the play in one of their articles where they were like, and you can also catch this show. So yeah, I mean, I got the things I wanted out of it, but I guess I was just
Then the
like
next step. So that like, okay, so I've done that. I got that press. How did you decide like the next thing to do?
the next thing was this. The next thing was there's a largest South Asian festival at the time that used to happen in Toronto, the largest in all of North America, where like 1 million people would go through this festival every year. And it was South Asian arts, period. So it was like music, dance, theater, everything. I got invited by them because somebody saw something on Facebook and a friend connected and then they're like, yes, bring your show. And we went there and then that show was sold out. It was like 200-seat theater, much bigger than the Midtown one because the Midtown was 65 seats, I think. 200-seat theater, sold it out. It was an amazing experience. And then I was just like, oh, that's interesting. Then I came back to my job at Google and I was like, what do I do now? And so then I was like, oh, I want to act. I think I want to like see if I can do this for real. So I started applying for jobs and whatever. And through that, within that year, I booked my first regional show, which would give me like EMC points, right? Because at this point, I only wanted to do theater, guys. I thought that was
Equity
the
membership
equity
candidate,
membership,
trying to
right?
get into the equity union. Yeah. Mhm.
Yep, but it was like a 12, was it like a 14, 16 week contract, something like I can't remember the weeks, but it was like give me X number of points for X number of weeks. It was outside of New York, for a few months. And then the play I was started talking to people at the US Embassy in Pakistan where they wanted to tour it. And that was looking like a 1 to 2 month engagement. That's how we were talking about it back then.
Oh, okay. Hold on a second.
Yeah.
I started talking to people at the U.S. Embassy to Pakistan. How did that happen? Yeah.
Through Facebook. Facebook used to be a real
You
thing.
approached them or they approached you?
They approached me. Somebody who was in Pakistan saw that I was doing this. They're like, let me connect you. So they connected me. And then the embassy was like, yes, we have this artist program. We do an artist exchange between like America and Pakistan. Would you like to come on this artist exchange program? And I was like, sure. So we were talking about that. Then I started dreaming bigger, right? I was like, I want to go take the show to the largest theater stage in the world, which was Edinburgh. And I'd applied and I got in to the assembly. So now I potentially had like starting in August with this regional play with all these things I had lined up, potentially had like 4 months of like acting gigs that would potentially actually pay me, right? That between the theater gig and this gig and the US Embassy gig. I was like, oh, so now I have to make a decision. Like either I stay at Google forever and ever, or maybe I peace out. That was tough, that was tough. But, it's like when you're really young and you're making a lot of money and you have a lot of savings. Seemed like a lot of savings at the time because 'cause you're young and dumb. I was like, I can do this. And I was like, whatever, like the tech job will always be there. I can come back, I can do something else. I can go work
Yes,
at
because
another
tech never changes or evolves.
never changes or evolves. It stays evil throughout the year. It's what it does. So yeah, at the time I was just like, I was like, yeah, I'll just like whatever, come back, it'll be here. So I made that leap, and kind of went on this journey. Yeah.
Okay, so you made that leap. So you did Edinburgh and Pakistan as part of one big trip, or they were two separate?
No, I went to Edinburgh in August, then I came back and I performed, I remember with the All for One Theatre Festival in September. That was here.
Mhm.
Then I did the whatever 2-month long engagement it was, whatever it was, the regional theater thing. I did that. Then it- then I want to say it was the Pakistan thing getting ended up getting pushed. I went, I think in March of the following year. I did the tour in Pakistan.
Great, and I'm dying to talk about that. But first, let's talk about the Edinburgh Fringe. So the
Yes.
thing that's challenging about Edinburgh is that you've got 200 shows happening and everybody's competing for the same audience.
Yes.
What was your experience like there? How did you get audiences? Did you get audiences?
Yeah, it was exhausting. When we started, we had days of like 9 people in the audience. It was sad. And then this is so crazy. I remember random people started telling me, "Hey, this somebody posted your review on the stall of the bathrooms. I don't know, public bathroom somewhere in the mail and the people, and you're like, your reviews are there." And so I was like, "Oh, that's really weird. What?" But I was also but I think when people started telling me that, I think word of mouth had started spreading about the middle of the run. Because in Edinburgh, you're performing every single day for like 25 days. So you do 25 shows in 25 days with like 1 day off. And
Mhm.
so as that was happening, I started getting really good reviews, word of mouth started spreading, and then it was like, we started selling out.
So how did you get those reviews? Was it hard to get reviews at the Edinburgh Fringe? Like how did you
I
get
know.
reviewers interested?
I don't know. I mean, so for the Edinburgh, that's the one time I have hired a publicist. I hired a publicist and then I freaking trolled Twitter and I blasted everyone I could think of who could give me a review. And, I think it was really like a group effort, a lot of word of mouth, a lot of like reaching out to people I knew. Then the publicist also kind of did her magic. I remember the London Times came and wrote a review that they never published. Because she
Hmm.
was like, "Hey, the London Times is going to be there today." They came, they picked up their tickets. I know they were in the audience. And then she was like, "Oh, maybe they're going to post it tomorrow, post it next week." Never posted it.
Hmm.
These things happen.
Yep.
But we got
Yep.
so many. We got so many. And honestly, like, it was interesting. We got a really great review from a very well-known Edinburgh publication. The review itself was really good, but like it was 3 stars. I remember that like almost broke my heart a little bit. I was like, "Oh, maybe this is over. They hate me."
Hmm.
And Matt, I will also say this really sticks out to me when I talk about Edinburgh. I remember this one review in the Ed Fringe. I feel like it was a little bit racist because the guy goes, and she's talking about Muslim things, but like she's not even mad. And I remember I had a booker come and then we followed up with him via email. He was a booker in Europe, somewhere in like the Netherlands and other places like Denmark and Germany and whatever. And he was like very confused. He's like, "Well, this is not stand up and it's not a play. Like, I don't really know where to put it. What is it?" So
Mhm.
honestly, that year, 2013, a lot of the feedback from Edinburgh for me when I wanted to tour the show in Europe was like, "This is not really like, we don't know. It's not stand up and it's not we don't know where to put it. Like, where does this go?"
Mhm.
And then literally a couple of years later, Islamophobia became a real thing. And immigration became a real thing. And then everybody was like, "Oh, can we program your thing? Can we bring it? Can you bring it?"
Mm. So fascinating that when you first did your show, they were saying we don't know what to do with it, and then a couple years later, the world changed, and
Mhm.
suddenly there was an audience for your and a pathway for your show.
Yeah, like a huge audience. We had so many like sold out, tours and so many cities. And then, especially like in the UK, where I've done more than any other place, like Italy. Also, I ended up doing going back a couple of times to Italy. But yeah, it kind of became, it's really interesting. Yeah.
Amazing. And it occurs to me to ask, so some actors don't read reviews
Mhm.
because they don't want it to affect their performances. When you're doing a solo show though, and you're always self-producing a solo show, you really kind of have to read the reviews so that you can use them to market yourself.
Yeah.
uh, what I tell my students is reviews are useful if there are pull quotes you can use to further your show. Like that's just how you look at reviews. But I'm sure we're hearing these things that you just described impacted you. You read the review, you got to go on in an hour.
Yeah, you
How do
have
you
to
handle
compartmentalize.
that?
I've learned to be really good at that. It's like, look, sometimes you're like, you're in an audition room and you get like somebody comes out and they're really in a bad mood. You can't let that impact your audition when you walk into that room 2 seconds later. So it's just like you got to learn to compartmentalize. Same thing with the reviews. Like, yeah, I had to read all of them and I had to use my pull quotes and I had to get the 4 stars, had to go back, like redo my postcards in Edinburgh to put the 4 star reviews on there, and like those pull quotes, like you're saying, all of that work, and it was just like me doing all of that work. So of course you just kind of look, you can't take it personally, and you have to know, like, sometimes you're trying to do something, maybe you're not conveying it, or maybe the person watching it isn't getting it. It could be so many different things. And I will say, at that time the show was a little bit in flux and it needed a little tweaking. There were things that needed to just be, because it was like it never had a workshop. So Edinburgh was kind of like my workshop.
So your director was there, or you were doing it on your
Yeah,
own, or
no, my director came actually to Edinburgh. She came, she stayed with the show for many, many years before, because she wanted to travel too. I think it was exciting. So she stayed with the show. We traveled together for the first like 5, 6, 7 years I was doing it. And then eventually it became a thing where I was just able to get a technical writer together and just like travel it on my own. Yeah.
well, I was going to ask that question. you know, the people who do solo shows and I think tend to be the more successful solo show artists have to be self-starters. I mean, if you're doing a solo show, you're definitely already kind of that person, you know. And a lot of times people who do solo shows are folks like yourself who don't fit into the industry in a particular way. And they want to create not just a lane for themselves professionally, but create a lane in the national conversation about being the kind of person they are. So they're lone wolves.
Mm.
And that's been, you need to be that. Like you as a solo show artist, you have to have that drive, that self-starter energy, that passion, that chip on your shoulder about I'm changing the world with this show one performance at a time, even if there's 9 people or if there's 200 people. At the same time, you can't do it alone. So can you talk about like what kind of team you've assembled for yourself over the time and how because you also need to balance shift from being producer to I've got to perform the show now and I can't be handling ticket requests and I have to be
Yeah.
able to focus. So can you talk
I
about that?
mean, yeah, look, there's never or rarely has there been like a true producer that's come on board. So the one time there was a producer was when I did the 15 city tour in the UK, but that was like me cold calling, and the director cold called some of them. So between the two of us, we did like 9 or 10 or of those cities. That was us. And then there was like a producer, or I feel like he did 3 cities. Now that I'm thinking about it, which cities did he do? He did Blackburn and like to Birmingham and one other. So like, yeah, so there you go. So the producer that came on board did those 3 cities, and then we did the rest of the 12 cities. And yeah, and then like with logistics, it was helpful. That guy was able to like to travel us physically to some of the locations in a car, as opposed to us taking a train with the heavy luggage that we had, because some of the props at that time, I remember I was traveling with these like boxes and stuff, which was kind of silly. Live and learn a little bit. But yeah, so that was useful. I think on and off we've had people kind of come on board. So at Abington, when we did the show, it was a 3-week run. And of course, there was a producer on board that kind of wanted to, that was in response in 2017. That was a response to the 2016 election in New York. She did this amazing Lady Liberty Festival where it was like short plays, and then my play also was part of it. So she was really producing truly, and I did nothing. I did very little producing that round. So there've been like little pockets of that kind of stuff. And then of course, like originally, like when we did the big run at the Flea Theater, there was a whole team, right? There was like lighting design and costume design and like all the people. We had all the whole team, which was kind of like the most full the show has ever been. And then I was able to kind of take that and then start touring with the pared down version of it. But I couldn't have done it if I didn't have the whole team to do the full version, to then be like, okay, now I need to know how I can pare it down to just, if it's just me traveling with the show, how do I do that?
When you're cold calling these theaters, I assume that you're building sort of a packet of materials to send to people. And what would that include? I'm imagining maybe a video of the show, the script, reviews, like.
Yeah. So originally just like a cold call just to like get through, but I also like research the heck out of these things. So I like look these people up and see where, you know, like I really like look them up and I'm like, okay, is there a real connection? Like, does it say in their bio that they also like, I don't know, noodles? Like, what do they like to eat? Like, is there like a common something there? And not never to be fake about it, but really be like, okay, well, what is a common interest? So when I call them, I have something to talk to them about. And and don't be fake, because people can tell like you're being fake, but I'm like, hey, I, or whatever, or hey, I saw in your bio that you're really interested in programming diverse stories by women. Hey, I'm a diverse woman and I have a story. Would you be interested? Or just like say something silly to make them laugh, like, oh, I have this show, it's really scandalous, the title, are you ready? It's called Dirty Paki Lingerie. And Paki's like the N word in the UK. So so which I kind of knew in the back of my mind, but never really thought was going to be a thing, because I didn't think I was going to be touring in the UK when I first started working on the show. So just finding the common ground and like, having the conversation, and there's just to see where it goes from there. And then you follow up with an email. And of course, you put your trailer. If they ask for the full show, you can put the full show video. But also like your big press that you have, you put it all together in a packet. Any great pictures, any great quotes. Of course, they go like at the front of your packet, so people can just kind of see. Um, yeah, that's
So you
really it.
have people ask about this. So a trailer and a show video are two separate things.
Yes, the trailer
So
is
you're
shorter, like a minute or two long. Usually that's kind of the highlights from your thing. And sometimes you can use pull quotes in that. Like if you have a big, like the New York Times said, it's a great show, or whoever. So put those pull quotes in your trailer, just like 1 to 2 minutes long, highlight reel. And then of course the show is the whole show, from beginning to end, the hour long. Yeah.
wonderful, wonderful. Pakistan. Tell me about the tour of Pakistan.
Yeah, it was a little bit crazy. I was like really scared. I was like, am I gonna die? But also they make it so crazy. So okay, first of all, my family's from Pakistan. I spent my summers as a kid going there every single year. I spent my summers there, sometimes 2 or 3 months, however long that was. So that was such a different experience. And then I traveled with the US Embassy and I felt like a target. I thought I was gonna get murdered because it's just the way it is. It's like you're a target.
Well, you're writing about, you're sort of in a culture that doesn't
Yeah,
necessarily embrace some of the
all of
things
that.
you're saying about the women. Now, just to be clear, it's called Dirty Packy Lingerie. It's not a particularly, it's not a risque show. It's
It's not.
really what's risky about it is revealing the emotional lives, dreams, and wishes and thoughts of Arab American women as they look to balance honoring their cultural traditions with being an American and having freedoms and ideas that they wouldn't have had where they came from, right? With that, is
A
that?
100%. Yeah, no, 100%. So that's it. So there's nothing risque in it. I
But
pull up
it,
some
but in
videos.
Pakistan, I would imagine you're
Yeah,
dropping a bomb. I
it
mean,
gets crazy because, well, it gets crazy because it also it talks about the play talks about. There's one little bit where I talk about they have these blasphemy laws because Pakistan is like terribly racist towards any minorities, and Christians fall into that minority. And so do like other Muslim sects, like Shias. Like Sunnis are the majority, that's a sect of Islam, and then are not. So there's always these terrible things that are happening. For instance, the day I landed, there was a bomb that went off in a Shia neighborhood, and a lot of people were injured and died. And it was a weird time when I was touring there. I think Pakistan is a very different place right now. There's not the civil unrest as much as it was back then. The day I was leaving Karachi, there was some senator equivalent person was shot at. And so we were literally in the middle of an engagement at a college where I was doing a workshop. And then they came in, the US Embassy folks are like, hey, we got to leave right now because they're shutting down streets. You're not going to be able to get to the airport for your flight, which was later that day. So they're like, we're going to get you there sooner. So it was like crazy stuff like that was happening a little.
Tell me about the time you performed and 30 men came in with armed, right?
So that was, yeah, I told you that story. So that was also in Karachi. It was one of my first performances, and I felt like I had to so heavily censor myself. So I remember when like the person that introduced me was like, and now Aizzah Fatima, this artist, will come and talk to you about some monologues. Like it was such a weird introduction. What is happening? And then I felt like I couldn't say a lot of these things that talked about the blasphemy laws in Pakistan that like criticized them. That's that, whatever thing. So I kind of self-censored because the ISI showed up and there were these 30 men in like giant guns. And the ISI is
So
the
they
FBI.
came in. You have to tell the story because it's amazing. They walked in. And you're about. Are you about to perform or you're
It was
performing?
before I had even performed. They came and they sat in the back rows. And then I was like, weird. I was like,
Like
what?
30 guys with machine guns, right?
Machine guns. I'm like,
Yeah.
why are they here? Who are they? And then somebody's like, oh, it's the ISI, which is the FBI equivalent of the Pakistani,
You
I
thought
was
they
like,
were coming for you, but they were actually there to protect you.
were they? They were sitting there and they were just watching and staring. And I don't know if they ever laughed. It was weird.
Oh my
The
goodness.
whole thing was so weird. Yeah, but I do, so then the US Embassy was like, yeah, whenever we do an event, they come. Why are they there? Yeah, but that's like a side of Pakistan like I have never seen as a kid growing up, going and visiting in the
Uh,
summers and whatever. I never saw any of this. So it was such a strange experience.
were you editing? When you say you edited yourself, was that in the moment you started editing yourself?
Yeah, I was like,
Kind of
oh,
pulling
when
back from certain lines and
yeah,
things?
well, yeah. So then what happened was there was like all this craziness. Like there's like lights went out because there's like load shedding sometimes, and then they didn't have the right equipment in the theater to run the whole show. I was like, guys, I'll do some of the characters. I'll do like 30 minutes of characters. And then we had a panel afterwards. So we'll just do the 30 minutes, we'll do the panel. We're not gonna do the whole show. That was like a decision we made very early on that day because things were like so like crazy. And yeah. And
What was the,
so no,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, that was it. What were you gonna say?
So
What
what
there
was
was?
the response? I mean,
Yeah,
were women in the audience and how did they respond or
yeah.
men?
Look, the response was all amazing, but you also have to understand when you're traveling with the U.S. Embassy, it is so heavily curated. Only people who are allowed to come watch you are like people who are on their approved lists. Everyone speaks English. First of all, they are screened heavily because the US Embassy has a list of people they would invite to their events, right? And that's it. And then there's like security and guards and the FBI sitting in the back. So it's a very curated experience from I've talked to friends about this who have actually gone and done other kinds of work there through film, theater, all of it. And they're like, well, when you go on your own, it's like such a different experience. It's
Mm.
like, they're like, oh, Isa, I didn't have the experience you had, yeah, it wasn't like all this heavy police. Anyway, yeah.
But
So
I want to hear more about, so even though it was a curated audience, what was their response to seeing the
yeah,
themes you were bringing up and the things you were saying?
it was very positive. I didn't hear any negative responses. I mean, I think people really enjoyed it. And then it was interesting. It also gave them an avenue to then talk about their own issues, which I cannot relate to, right? As like an American, so outside of my, so there was a group of Sikh individuals. So Sikh is a very prominent sect of religion that is not Muslim. It's in India primarily, and also in Pakistan, right? In one of these cities, I think this was in Karachi or Lahore, I can't remember. But these men came, and then they felt like they could have a bit of a voice to like talk about their issues, how they're being marginalized within this community where they're on the fringes. They're
Mm.
not the predominant, you know? So that I thought was interesting. So in a way, like the show allows people who are kind of being sidelined or marginalized within their communities to then be able to talk about the issues that plague them.
That is
I think
so, that's such an interesting point, Aizzah. And I think many of my students are writing from, the fear so often with writing a solo show is, oh, it's just about me. I'm being self-indulgent. Will other people connect to it? And the argument that I always make is the more specific you are to your experience, the more universal it becomes. And it's great to hear that in this circumstance, I'm sure that there are a lot of Arab American women, Pakistani American women who responded very specifically to the things you're saying. But then there are other people, what I'm hearing is from other marginalized communities who are just responding to that element of it, and it's giving them a freedom to think about their lives in a different way, an avenue to communicate. So you would, and then you would give them the opportunity. Would you often do workshops afterwards, or like a talk back kind of thing?
Yeah, so almost every performance I have, there is a talk back or a workshop or some element of that because I think very early on I realized it was like a gift that I had this show, and then I was like, oh, I can actually use this to do much more than just like I performed, great, see ya, bye. You know? Yeah. So it's been really lovely. Like, yeah, every single performance at least has a talk back, if not something more like an element of a workshop or storytelling or something.
Because the show isn't just about pushing you forward, it's you're looking to shift the world with your show.
I mean, I'm always trying to shift the world with all of the art I create, absolutely. And the show was the catalyst of all of that. You know, since then I've like worked in a lot of different other mediums. And so, yeah, that's the goal. I'm like, how can I create something that yeah, different perspective that changes hearts and minds.
Were you nervous about leading those workshops or talkbacks? Did you develop a
Gosh,
set of skills around that? Like, how did you
Matt,
figure
in
out
the
how to do
beginning,
that?
yeah, I reached out to you. I don't know if you remember this. I reached out, I was like, Matt, I don't know. This college wants me to do this. I don't know how to do it. And you're like, oh, talk to my so-and-so student who has an MFA in like doing exactly that, creating workshops. So
Yeah.
we had this conversation and she was like, "Hey, you're the expert on the themes you're talking about," you know? It was just like giving me the confidence to be like, "Oh, I'm the expert. Okay, great." And then she gave me some very practical tools of like, "Oh, like this is one exercise I do. This is another exercise I do." So that was very, very useful to me
Can
to develop these workshops.
you
Yeah.
tell me one of those exercises that you do?
Yeah, she said you just like bring a bag of like the stuff that belongs to that character. So for instance, I have this 6-year-old girl and she has like Dora the Explorer and other things, right? Her items, like what are the items? So bring a bag of things and then pull them out and have the audience be like, okay, what do you imagine this person is? What do you think they look like? Who is this person? And it's interesting because what ends up happening with that character is she talks about, and it's based on a real thing that happened in New York, uh, where this guy was taken away from his family of like 4 little girls as a case of a mistaken identity because his name was Muhammad something, put in a detention center somewhere. His family didn't know where he was because he wasn't a US citizen, he was a green card holder. His property was confiscated. His wife was a single mom, didn't speak much English. They were immigrants. And the local mosque in Long Island was trying to like raise funds for this family so they could survive because the father had been gone for a year. They didn't know where he was. You know, as the NYPD and the FBI took away many Muslim men. So that's what, in a funny, humorous way, the little 6-year-old girl talks about. But nobody would ever, guess that from. So it's an interesting way to bring the audience in, to like involve them in this exercise. And then you kind of end up talking about racial profiling and how that happens, but through a character. Then you show them the character, you perform the character, and then you have the conversation about the themes of like what that character touches on. In that instance, it ends up being racial profiling.
Beautiful, beautiful. So let's talk about schools. So one of the ways that a solo show can have more of a life is to perform at colleges or high schools or middle schools or whatever. And you wound up doing some of that as well. Can you talk a little bit about how you got into doing that, and did you change the show to do it in those places?
Yeah, I mean, it didn't change the show at all. But yeah, so that was like going to colleges was the first time when I was like, oh, I need to offer some kind of a workshop because then you can ask for a bigger fee. I kind of really didn't know how to do that at all, any of it. But I have this amazing friend who was worked in like sales and marketing for years. And then he was like, Aizzah, this is what you do. So you do what, like, he goes, oh, like my sister-in-law is a wedding photographer. And here's what she does. She offers like three packages. She offers like a silver, a bronze, a silver, and a gold. And the price increases by 1,000 or more for each. So it's like, here's where you can start, and here's where you can end at like $5,000. You can ask for this much money from people. And that was really interesting. I was like, okay. So I literally like took her package of wedding photography and I superimposed my workshop slash whatever. So,
So
so I
like the
was like,
basic was maybe just doing the show,
just
and
do
then
the show and do a panel after. The second was like do a show, do a panel, do one workshop. And then the third was like do like multiple workshops, like two, like come talk to a class, come do a workshop, come do this, that. It was so interesting. And I eventually like ended up, I think I started off offering the first show I ever did at somebody, it was, oh God, it was this college year that approached me in New York, and they were like, it was Fordham. And they're like, what would you charge for this? I was like, oh, 750. And then $750. And I split that with my director. It's hilarious. So, just no clue, no clue. And then no clue, no clue. And then eventually I was just like, oh, okay, well, maybe my base point should be like 1,800. Then the middle package could be like 2,500. And then the big package could be like 5,000. And then I even like graduated from that. Eventually I realized a lot of people would go for the middle package without even think they'd be like, we want the middle one. And so I was like, oh, let me just increase the amount on the middle one. So then I was like asking for like 35, 3,800 for the middle one, and people would do it gladly because they want to do the five and they want to do the last. And yeah.
yeah, that's interesting to note. I know when I get my car washed, there's like good, better, and best. And I'm like, I don't know what any of these things are. It's like the undercarriage suds are, and I'm just like, I think I'll just do middle. I don't want to do the lowest, and I don't want to splurge, so I'll go the middle. That's an interesting sales thing you
People
discovered there.
do
Yeah.
the middle all the time, which is really fascinating. And then the other thing was I just discovered if you're going to a big Ivy League school or whatever, just ask for 5 grand. They have it.
Yeah.
They have it. I remember
Well,
one
how
time
do you approach? So what I usually tell my students who are interested in doing colleges, not every show is meant to be done at colleges, but a lot of them do. If there's a theme that connects to, some of my students have done, like show Robin Gelfenbein, who we just talked about, had a wonderful piece called "My Salvation Has a First Name" about being bullied in college, and that really dimmed her light because she wanted to be the goofy weather girl on the campus TV station, and she was targeted by this fraternity and really bullied. And then she saw an ad on a bulletin board for driving the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile for a year. And it's actually very competitive. She auditioned, got the job, and then got paired with a fraternity guy to drive around the country in the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile for a year, and wound up befriending him and working through some of the stuff. And so bullying was a real theme to that piece. And so she wound up doing it in high schools and doing workshops as part of it. So obviously there's a lot in your show that would connect. Now, would you connect? And what I also tell them is like, you don't have to just go to there's the theater department, but I would imagine there's also like, the LGBTQ club or organization within it. Were you appealing? Who would you go and contact, and how would you make these connections?
Yeah, so I kind of like again like fell into this. So like the first show I did at Fordham, I realized that they had gotten the law department, the English department, and the Muslim Student Association and the history department to like co-sponsor my show. And so then I was like, oh, these are all the departments I can. And it was so much trial and error. I also realized like at Ivies, when you go to like the LGBTQ department or like a specialized student group, they actually get funding for the whole year to
Right,
bring over people like us, and no artists are reaching out to them. It's usually a professor. So it
right,
was such an easy in, but only at the Ivies. When you go to like smaller schools, like college, state schools, Fordhams of the world, they're they usually don't have that kind of money. So you should go to like the department head. And it's just a matter of like finding all of the themes. So there's a workshop I teach around this, and Matt, you know this because you encouraged me to do it. And then Natalie Kim encouraged me to, and that's the why I taught the workshop the first time I ever did it.
Are you still teaching that
Been in
workshop?
a long time I haven't done it. Yeah,
I
just
think
like
you could have an audience. I mean, if you
if
want,
anybody's interested, reach out and we'll teach it again. Yeah. Wow, yeah. I mean, but again, it's like making that, like pulling out all the themes and then just like making sure you're reaching out to those people that will resonate with those themes, just like you just said. Yeah.
do you, I mean, I suggest that they start with their alma mater, because they'll have an in there, there's a reason to do it. Then once you've done it in one school, does that make it easier to approach other ones? Like if you've done it at an Ivy League school,
Of
is it
course.
easier to go to the other Ivies,
Of
that
course. It's like once you say I did it at Columbia, I did it at Cornell, then everybody else is like, oh, well, if it's good enough for them, then we want it too. Literally, that was my experience. Like once I did Fordham, that was the first one that had approached me because they saw it in Midtown. And actually, a professor we had from there on our panel came, saw it. And then for women's studies, she teaches in the women's studies department. She had us come in. And so once we did the one, we were like, oh, I was like, oh, okay, I can just do more. I can do more of this. I can reach out to them and they'd be interested.
that's a really interesting idea. If you're debuting in a festival, you could have a panel as part of that, and then you invite professors from universities to be part of that panel.
Yep.
That might excite their interest to bring you to the college.
And they'll champion. And I have to say, like her name, I'm just gonna drop names now. I won't drop her name, okay? But she has been such a champion. She has like multiple times since then had me come talk to her classes and paid me for it. When I was doing my run at the Flea and later at Abington, she brought people, paid for students' tickets through her whatever organization, however that works. School paid for kids to come. So that's also happened with the professor at NYU that like randomly like found me somehow and has then like sent people to come to my shows. Yeah. So that'll happen. It's a good idea to do it. A panel, of course, after your show and invite these professors so then you can make that connection.
Fabulous. Now, and what you just answered my next question is, the audience at a college age through, so you can go again. Like, I mean, have you gone back to schools then? Like, or
There's some where I've gone back and like either like done the show or done other things. And then also, Matt, when doing all of this, what happened was I started doing my feature film. So the last few years, it's like and then pandemics and strikes and all of this. So my focus really shifted from like doing less of the college stuff and more of the other film and TV work that I've
okay,
been
so you perfect segue.
doing.
Uh, so how did you go from solo show to film?
I know. So how did I go? So I feel like solo show, I was performing it at after Edinburgh. I came back that end of August. In September, I had a show lined up with the All for One Theater Festival. Michael, who does that, who's amazing.
Walk. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know if he's doing that anymore.
I think they still exist, but I think
In a
not
different way.
sure what they
Yeah.
do.
I think they do more curated, like you have to know them and then, So, but back then there was like an open call. I think I just submitted, got
It's
in.
just yeah, the All for One Festival, the idea behind the Michael Walk had a wonderful idea, which was taking solo shows that are successful in New York and then representing them for pitching them to basically booking them in theaters and institutions around the country.
Yeah.
And so they did that for a little while. I'm not sure. I think it still exists, but not doing quite the same thing. But when you did it, they had like a big showcase in New York where they had several solo, they were kind of debuting all their solo shows, all solo shows that had done their shows other places first.
Oh
And then,
yeah, for sure. I think there were celebrities the year I did it. It was like
yeah,
Coleman Domingo and then
yeah.
God, the lovely guy from Law and Order who played the psychiatrist on it forever. He was directing one of the shows of your students. There were a bunch of people. Anyway, so there was like it was like five of us. We did this thing and it was a big thing. And so while I was performing at the Cherry Lane Theater, there was a film director who was in the audience that day, just randomly saw the poster, happened to be visiting New York, saw the poster, bought tickets, came with like her five friends. They were all on a thing together. and approached me afterwards and wanted to see if I wanted to turn it into the characters into a feature film. And it was an interesting time because I was totally thinking, I was like, well, I just came from Edinburgh and we had like these like 50, 60 seats. We did sell out some of the shows towards the end of the run, right? And then I was like, well, it was still such a small audience. Like, how do I take it to a bigger? And I was like, I think that's film. And that was that journey. That was that like a very long 8, 9 year long journey that we kind of went on together, like writing, fundraising for this film that's completely done independently and like a huge learning curve. She had done a bunch of shorts that had done really well, like won an Emmy for one of them, was a Princess Grace Award recipient for another one, but she had never done a feature. She's also very much a visual director who's not a writer. And so it was like very hard. I think we like struggled so much with the writing of the screenplay and like just learning, having coming from like writing one play to like now writing a feature film with like multiple characters. It's the hardest thing to do, an ensemble cast. And so it was years and years of like just all of that work. That was very, very hard. And I
And
would
that
not
direct
recommend,
and that
but
director's
I did
name
it.
is and that
Her name
director's
is Iman Zawari. She's amazing. Her name is Iman Zawari. She teaches at University of Florida. She teaches film there for many, many years now. And yeah, it was an amazing journey.
So that was so you it was an independent film. So you raised the money, the two of you yourselves, shot
Yes.
the film, and then how did it and then what happened with it once you made the film?
It's so interesting, Matt. All of my work is almost like, we don't know where to put this. What is this? Like literally. So we started submitting into festivals, rejected everywhere, everywhere. And then the pandemic happened and we were like, hey guys, maybe let's re-edit. So we opened up the edit in the middle of it. We were like, I don't think the film is there yet. As one of our producers, actually, Roy Wall, he was like, let's re-edit. And so let's get a new editor on this. So he did, and we did re-edit, and we were like trying to fix story problems in the edit because we didn't do it in the writing because we were just new to it. We didn't know what we were doing. So we did. We fixed it. And then, it's interesting, right? Then George Floyd happened. And then Trump happened, and all these things happened, and the conversations became so different. And so Americanish, which is the feature film, is set against that backdrop, right? It has like this very racist guy in the film who is running for an office, who is very much fashioned after Trump. And I don't know, something changed in the it's interesting. So when all of that stuff happened, there's a black lead character that's a romantic lead in the feature film. We started getting, so our first acceptance was Cannes Film Festival, which is a really large, well established for 30 years Asian film festival. They showcased us and we were a centerpiece film. And it's like, you guys, you always have to advocate. So they were like, hey, San Francisco shut down. This was 2021. They're like, yeah, we'll just do it's a virtual world premiere virtually. And we were like, no. So we went out to an organization that we have both been supported by as filmmakers. It's called the Islamic Scholarship Fund. We're like, hey, can you partner with us? They're based out of San Francisco. We're like, can you partner with us? Can we do a drive-through screening so we actually have an audience and it's a live thing and we can show up and not be virtually watching on? So they were like, yes, sure. And so it was so funny. So then the festival was like, yes, but we don't have funds to do this. So we're like, let's go raise some funds. So we raised the funds, partnered with this organization, did the screening, we won the audience award. That gave us a platform. So once that happened, then the film started getting programmed everywhere. We got an amazing publicist on board, actually, David Magdell. He did so much for us. And then we ended up winning like 25 awards and like we played at like 50 festivals. But I will say, I as a first-time filmmaker was like, it has to get into Sundance, otherwise my career is over. I did the same thing I did with the New York Fringe. Again, I don't learn. So
I hear a common theme. Yeah.
I do.
Well,
I was
but
like,
I
the same
think
thing.
many
So
people are very, yeah, I mean,
and
there's
it didn't get into Sundance. You guys had never got into South by Sundance or Tribeca, rejected from all of it. And I feel like I'm always rejected from the mainstream. I don't know why. I know why. I know why. Because this is it's not a festival film. It's not like sad, somebody dies. It's very dramatic. It's none of those things. And I swear, I feel like over the years, we've literally gotten this feedback from so many, even when we were like trying to apply for funding. It was just like, people are from the Muslim world, they're interested in like, did your father abuse you? Did you get stoned to death? Tell us more about your, and this film is, it's like a happy, fun, funny, it's a comedy, even though it talks about very serious things, I think similar to my play. And so then people like don't know, and we kept asking, people were like, what is this like? I was like, well, I don't know, I've never seen, have you seen a Muslim film with Muslim female characters that's funny, that's an ensemble, that's a comedy? Like, I've never seen it, so I don't know what it's like. You
Mhm.
know, it's just tricky. It's tricky until like somebody saw it in at a festival in Orange County in LA. They did an introduction to Sony, and then Sony bought it. Sony bought it for worldwide distribution. Unheard of. Worldwide distribution with Sony International, and now it's everywhere. I get messages every day because somebody watched it on an airline. It's on like 13 different airlines internationally. It's, you know, it's available on Amazon. It's, I think, YouTube, Apple TV, like all the platformers you can buy and rent it and all of that stuff. So we had a theatrical run. Uh, I'd never heard of this theater. We played in Philadelphia. Sorry, not Philadelphia. In Arizona, and there's
Easy to
this.
confuse those two
Sorry,
states.
I was like, what's not Philadelphia? It was Arizona. Played in Arizona, and there's a theater called a chain of theaters that I didn't know about, Harkins Theaters. So Mr. Harkins saw it at a festival and he loved it, and he was like, we would love to put this in like 5 theaters, and we got a theatrical run, and then it played at IFC here in New York and in California and in Arizona and other places. It was amazing. It was like a dream, all of it in the middle of the freaking lockdowns that were happening last year. You know, the double strikes that were happening in our, I keep
Yeah.
calling wanting to call it the pandemic. It was like the other pandemic we all went through.
Well, Isa, I mean, just what an incredible story. And when you think of that first phone call, I think of that first phone call,
I
and
didn't know what I was doing, Matt. I was like,
well, you say that, and I think anyone watching this sees that you don't know what you're doing and you know what you're doing. You know, you have an incredible drive, you have a vision, whether you can always admit it to yourself or not. And you really are out to change the world, and it's happening. And it's great to hear in your story something I wasn't aware of, is just sort of how you'd be in limbo for a while and then the world would catch up, and then the world would change and there would suddenly be this, and you were there to, you had, as artists do, you had gone out into the frontier, into the unknown, and created something. And when the world caught up to you, they embraced it, you know. And I think that that's really the key of doing solo shows, that I try to tell my students, you know, is don't look at what other people are doing. Listen to what is being called to be born from you, that uniqueness of you, that thing that people haven't seen yet. Your story is unique and powerful. Take that risk on you, and it's scary. And I remember the other thing I want to say. I remember in class as you were writing it, a lot of tears. I remember a lot of tears.
every day. Oh my God, every day. I would be the, well, because I felt so incompetent in that class. The people were such stars, right? People, I don't know if you remember this, but we had people who were like, my grandma was on Broadway, and that's my pedigree. And I was like, oh my God, I can't dance, guys. That's not, I've never acted in anything. It was like such a scary, crazy, but you know, I think, I honestly, if it wasn't for you, I don't know. I don't know if I would be here.
Well, thank you. That's so love. That makes me feel very happy to have helped, have taken a hand in the creation of all the wonderful work that you've done. How does it feel for you looking back? So you've just reviewed all of this stuff, you know. How does it feel to have achieved this level of success? Is there still that voice saying, yeah, but I didn't get into Sundance? Or can you really like own the success that you've had?
I think I've learned to really own it. And I think, look, it's just like one more thing. If I ever do get into Sundance, I think it opens more doors for you. But it's like I've learned I have to go out there in the meantime and open my own doors, because no one's going to do it for me, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, look, it's like I'm living the creative life I always wanted to. And it's like, it's a gift. It's a
What
gift.
is there anything you would want to say to the young Isa as she's sobbing and, you know,
Oh my
toiling
God.
through those early pages, or other solo show students who are, or solo show either they're thinking of doing a solo show, or they've written their solo show and they're just feeling overwhelmed. Like,
Yeah, I just think take the first step, you know? Just like take the first step it and just keep moving forward. And I know the story, I don't mean to sound so rosy, it was very hard. Every single step of this has been very difficult. Believe in yourself, surround yourself with people who will help uplift you because you're going to need that. And through Matt, like your classes and like going to these Edinburgh and these experiences, I have found a really lovely like solo show artist community, to just kind of like reach out to. And so that I think that's really important. So make sure that you stay engaged, give back, keep moving forward. There's a lot of rejection. Don't let it stop you. Just everyone, I don't care who they are, all of us are always getting rejected. It's like 98% rejection and 2% maybe acceptance, and this is the result of the 2%, not the 98. So just know that that's every artist's journey.
yeah, oh, that's beautiful. And I do think you're very generous as well. We haven't really touched on that, but I've experienced you being very supportive and generous to other solo show artists starting out and
Always. I mean, I'm here to help. Like, people have questions, like so many coffee meetings about like, can I pick your brain? I'm like, sure, pick my brain.
My last question for you is what's next?
So for me, so I have shifted into more film and TV work, even as an actor. And I remember I was talking about when I started, my goal was just to act in theater, and that's definitely changed. So I'm definitely doing just as an actor more film and TV now.
Well,
And then
has your solo show opened up those avenues for you?
I think in some ways, yeah. I mean, I got my first manager because I had done the show. Then I got uh because I was doing the solo show, I got into this play that I met through my solo show. My manager came to see me in the play. It was also at the Cherry Lane years ago, and 7, 8 years ago now. And I've been with the same manager who's then since then hooked me up with a great agent. So for acting stuff, that's all going really well. But yeah, started with the solo show. And then I think this like wanting to like write more, I ended up, this is just me. I mean, everybody's not like this, but after the experience of Americanish, the feature film, I just felt like I needed to like learn more craft. So I did a low residency MFA at Emerson, which is just, you stay here in New York and you just go there for 1 week on the LA and the Boston campuses, 1 week a semester, and everything else was already online. And then the
In
pandemic happened.
screenwriting? In
In
screenwriting?
screenwriting. Yeah, in screenwriting. So I'm definitely doing more. I have a thing coming up, a show I have that's going to be part of the Gotham Market in September. And then I'm actually getting serious about a second solo show that I wrote with you years ago, which is more personal than Dirty Paki Lingerie, which was interviews and stuff like within the community. This show is more about my own experience of working at Google, women in tech, and all of that good stuff that I'm hoping to get off the ground later this year. I actually have dates for a performance in Italy in November, which happened through performing Dirty Paki Lingerie and meeting those people. And then they're like, hey, do you have a second show? I'm like, sure, here. They're like, yeah, bring it. So, it's exciting. I get to
Wonderful.
go to
Oh,
Italy, make some work.
congratulations. Well, I love that show too, and I can't wait to see all the things that you're going to make happen with that show.
Thank you for being part of the journey, Matt. This is, yeah,
My
it's
honor, my
started in
honor,
one of your classes all those years ago.
my honor, and my delight, as you are so delightful, Isa. And thank you again for doing this. I was going to make this just part of the panel, but I think now we're going to have to
So
release this
long.
as its
How long?
own. I think we're going to have to release this as its own interview that people can watch before the panel.
Oh my
Which is
goodness.
great. There's so many wonderful. You've just provided so much inspiration, so many resources, so many ideas, and you're a wonder.